This is the Long Haul Pedalcast with John McGavick and Steve Scholes. Incredible stories of endurance coming from the prairies. Be inspired to create your own long haul journey. As part of our three-part series celebrating the University of Manitoba Hall of Fame era for track and field and cross-country in the late 1980s and mid-1990s, we talked to Jeff McMillan. Jeff was part of an epic 4x800 relay gold that came down to 100th of a second, and a member of the track and field team that took home 3 banners from U Sport Championships in the mid-1990s. Jeff was also part of one of the most successful high school track and field teams in Manitoba history at Sisler High School that won nearly every event on the track at the 1991 Manitoba High School Athletics Association Championships. Jeff takes us through some of those great teams and events and his eventual move into coaching high school athletes, breaking provincial records with those teams, and lessons learned for creating an incredible team culture that fosters a lifetime of memory. We also learn about the ski wax company he started and my claim that his ski wax will be on medal-winning skis at the upcoming Winter Olympics in Milan. Enjoy. Welcome, everyone, once again to the Long Haul Pedalcast. Today, we've got a top runner and running coach on the Pedalcast. We've got Jeff McMillan, who is part of that U of M Hall of Fame running team from the late 80s and mid to mid-90s. Now a coach in Minnesota, a high school coach in Minnesota, and also a ski wax entrepreneur. So welcome, Jeff McMillan, to the Pedalcast.
Hey, it's great to be a part of this. I'm privileged to be here.
Awesome. And my co-host, John McGavick, great to have you here as well.
Great to be here.
And what's really cool is myself and John had admired Jeff from afar when he was at his peak of his running exploits and that U of M Hall of Fame team. And so really good to have Jeff here. And we want Jeff to tell us some stories about, that time period, but also before that with Sisler High School, but also all the things that he's done since then and what the lessons that he's learned. So maybe I'll turn it over to John to take it away here with Jeff.
Yeah. So whenever I give a talk at a scientific conference, I have to admit my conflicts of interest. And so one of my biggest conflicts of interest here, Jeff, is that I lived a block from you in Garden Grove, which we have called a suburb of Tyndall Park in the north side of Winnipeg. Followed each other. I followed you through elementary school and then into high school at Sisler. And the one thing that Steve and I were talking about in terms of inviting you here and why we wanted to see you here is that in my mind, you have been part of the 2 greatest, most accomplished track and field men's teams in the history of Manitoba. The 1991 Sisler Spartans, where the men won every event on the track except for 2. And then the Hall of Fame U of M Bison men's team in the early 90s that had some of the highest scoring championships ever. And so we really want to hear what your experience was like on both of those teams and the culture. And perhaps you could start with a 4x8 that you remember clearly that defines what you experienced as a U of M Bison track and field cross-country team member.
Well, thanks. It's funny when I coach kids nowadays, when we get to the race line, I tell them that, you're not going to remember most math classes. I mean, Steve might, but most people don't remember those. But you'll remember these races. Like, there's just something that it's just, you go through all these mundane race days and then you get these events. So really take it in, appreciate it. And I can remember those races so vividly. 30 years later, I can remember, the people around me. I can remember the intensity of the environment. And so I was really fortunate enough to be on some great teams and even ride the coattails of some pretty awesome guys so I was on 2 national championship 4x8 teams. And then I was also the alternate on one that set the national record for 30 years. And that one was, that year I came 5th at U Sport in the 600. And I still didn't make the 4x8 team that year.
Wow.
I think I'd run 153 low. 153 low, I think, indoors. And so that was kind of the quality of the team that year. So the first championship 4x8 was in Edmonton, and I just, I'd seen the 4x8s and how kind of crazy they get with everybody running on the track and just like you're running through a tunnel and you can't hear anything and it's just like madness. And so I remember just, getting the baton, just thinking, okay, just keep Daryl close, because Daryl feeling was going to be anchoring our team, and it kind of had, took some of the pressure off when you knew you had a guy at the end who could make up space if he needed to. And
so you're number 3.
The baton.
You're number 3.
So I think I actually when Tom Beeman was first, and he told me, see, right before the race, says, Jeff, don't worry, I'm gonna get you the baton in first place, and then he goes out and he's in dead last by like 20 meters. Like he's out jogging and everybody else is out sprinting, and he stays there and then Byron comes out to me and he said something. I think he said something about be careful, don't let a guy pass, because there's gonna be a bunch of guys right there. And that was great advice, because I remember so Tom did eventually kick down the field and gave me the baton at first. He held true to his word, and I remember getting the baton first, and I remember just don't go the first lap too crazy. That's always a mistake people make in the 4x8s, right? They go that first lap too crazy, and so I was really, really controlled my pace, and I'd spent a lot of time working on pacing, so I was comfortable with the pace. And I remember, the guy from UBC coming right up to my shoulder and just said, "Don't let him pass," because it was so loud in there you couldn't hear anybody. I remember looking at the video later on, and there was literally 6 guys beside that guy ready to go by.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then the race is over. I got in a fight. So I held him off basically the whole race. I think he made a hard surge with 300 to go, but only he made that surge, and I got on his shoulder, and then I was able to pass him and get the baton to Simon in first place.
And Simon Treppel.
Simon Treppel, yeah.
And Byron is Byron Goodwin.
Right, yeah. And so Simon is my neighbor, actually. Lives right beside me right now.
Oh, really?
In Winnipeg, yeah. It's pretty funny. So we share some of these stories. And so Simon actually got a pretty good gap, gave it to Daryl Filling to finish. And Daryl, we thought, this is wrapped up. He's got this big lead. But he had some of these crazy finishers behind him. And Neil Chomos from Alberta, Anthony Gar from Toronto. And there was one more from Windsor. It wasn't Rich Tremaine, but it was anyways. And they closed the gap pretty quick. And we think, okay, well. And then it was so loud in there. When Daryl made his kick to get the lead, we were going crazy. And Anthony Gar started coming back on him, and Daryl didn't. And we won by 100th of a second at 4x8 that year.
Oh my gosh! So this is go ahead.
Yeah, he actually passed Daryl, and Daryl thought he lost, but he didn't pass him till Daryl had crossed the finish line.
Oh
wow! And so it would have like a photo finish if it's 1/100th of a second. Like they had to look at it and.
Yeah, we didn't know. We couldn't celebrate until we got to photo finish. And photo finish, it's not like nowadays where the time comes up instantly, right? Like it takes a little time back there to look at the photograph, and they're. So it took a little bit before we actually figured we won. And
so for people that aren't aware, the U of M track, you were at the Butterdome at U of A. And
yes.
And the U of M track. So the Butterdome is a flat track, but it's 6 to 7 lanes. Manitoba, I think we're lucky we have one extra lane out there and we're banked. But when you're doing the 4x8, it's the end of the first day of track and field. Everyone has raced, everyone is fired up, and every athlete, every coach, every fan is in lanes 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and it's down to a 2-lane track. So when that guy tries to pass you, he's got people screaming in his ear on one side, and if you're a cycling fan, it's kind of like watching guys go up the Alpe d'Huez just through this tunnel of humanity, and all you're thinking is, I got to stay ahead.
Absolutely. Like the first time I went to CIAU Nationals at Max Bell and watched the 4x800. Like there was almost nothing in my entire sports career that I could compare to that. And the other example, like a South American bike race, when the fans are on the course hitting riders and all of that. Like it was so intense. And you had to go through that, and you can't hear anything. Like it's not like, hey, come on, you're right ahead, or someone's catching you. It just happens. With like full adrenaline. Mm-hmm. So what year did this take place, Jeff? Like what can you?
Yeah, so that was 1994. That was the year that we had I think we won almost every thing on the track too. We had a lot of great victories there. So I remember Daryl, because Daryl had run the 1500 that night before the 4x8. So it was a hard track. I remember that it took some things out of you there. So he wasn't exactly fresh when he ran that 4x8. So that's what made it a bit more close.
That's amazing. And importantly, and I think this is going to be part of our story here, all of those runners, Daryl was from Kenora, or was he from, so Daryl's from Kenora. Everyone else, Winnipeg. homegrown athletes. No one was recruited from elsewhere to be part of this record-breaking team. There was a culture, there was something in the water in Winnipeg during those years that led to all of these Winnipegger men, mostly endurance athlete, long distance running men, to create something ultra special. And for you and for a lot of those guys, it actually started maybe 2 or 3 years earlier in the high school competitions. So you were at Sisler, Byron Goodwin was at Grant Park, Tom Bima was at Grant Park. Where was Simon?
So I was at Grant Park too. I think those guys went to elementary school together.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Okay. So maybe let's rewind it a little bit and go back to, I don't know, grade 10 or 11 with our coach at the time was coaches at the time were Evan Jones and John Iwanski. And what was your experience like as an emerging track and field athlete?
Yeah, it's funny because I'd gotten into running, like everyone, the good thing about running is that everybody finds out if you're a decent runner just through phys ed class, right? It's one of those sports that you're just going to be exposed to at some point in your life. Unlike some, if it's lacrosse, you may never pick up lacrosse stick or something. So I'd known pretty early that I had some success in running, went to Garden Grove and had a running club there. Louis Alain was the coach there. Shout out to him who got us into running.
Yeah.
And so this is Sisler, I'd run cross country. But I remember going to the junior high meet and just getting crushed by all the Grant Park athletes. And I was like, why are they so good? Like they were just, so that summer I was signed up to go to the Peace Gardens to a cross country camp.
Oh, right on.
And all the cross country, some of those Grant Park guys there. And it was, it was some great coaches, Jeff Collins, it was a Grant Park coach, Al Dixon.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, wow, that was it just got me so passionate about running that I actually wanted to transfer to Grant Park of all places. I talked to my parents, like, the coaches there. Sister doesn't have a coach, doesn't have a program. And then that year they hired Evan Jones. And it was like, wow, okay, we got something going here. And then we started building from there. And I remember, that having Evan there was so key. Just having somebody who knew what they were doing with tracks. Up to that point, there was no track. It was just a phys ed teacher telling us to run laps around the school. And so Evan did a great job of just building. And I think this is such a crucial thing. And this is what I learned, and I try and really emphasize this for any program. The slowest kid has to feel valued as the fastest kid, right? Because every kid that comes to a practice brings energy, whether you know it or not. And so if you only have 4 kids that are fast, you don't have a lot of energy there. So you need just a lot of kids to create that energy, that positive energy that feeds off of training.
I love that. And
so I think that's what really happened at Sisler. It was a really welcoming group. And we had kids everywhere from, provincial champions to kids that were just out there to run, but they felt valued and they felt like, and they took it seriously and they really wanted to improve. So that was my first kind of taste of what a real team looked like, where everyone was encouraging, whether you're the fastest kid or the slowest kid, they all kind of felt valued.
That's amazing. So then you would have started at Sisler in grade 7, because back then Sisler was 7 to 12. You went straight from Garden Grove, which is rare. We don't do that anymore. But then by grade 10, you were starting to show some promise, because I do remember at like provincials, the junior boys races, you start to shine a little bit here.
Yeah, so I won provincials in the 1500 and then won the 3000 that year also. And I tried the triple, and then I ran the 8. And unfortunately, I came second to some guy named Byron Goodwin. He beat me that day. and funny enough, 2 years before that, Michael Kemp was the first JV boy to break 2 minutes in 800, and he ran 1:58. I think he broke the record. And both Byron and I broke 2 minutes that year. Wow. We were the second and third guy to do that. So, and now it's, that's just a common thing now. But back then, it was a big deal to break 2 minutes.
And I what's important for me in this narrative, and this was a huge part of what Evan Jones and John Iwanski were trying to promote, is you were first and foremost a Sisler Spartan. You weren't part of a private club. You weren't training at higher end facilities. You were smashing intervals in the hallways of Sisler in the winter, and then out on the track, or I don't know if you guys also ran on the railroad, the rail yards. Like John used to always take us out on the run on the railway tracks. But that's what you trained on, right? There was no like high level facilities or anything. You got to a provincial champion. You got to win and be a provincial champion from grassroots training. And what was that like there?
Yes, I actually have to confess something, because just before Evan got there, my parents, my mom was actually good friends with Michael and Paul Kemp's mom.
Oh, okay.
And she had phoned them and said, my son really wants to run. is there any place that he could do this? So I actually went to Flying M to George Tanner, who was their coach at the time. And so I started with him probably in grade 8, just a year before Evan got there. So when Evan came, I just explained, so I would once in a while I'd still train with Sisler, but once in a while I'd go out and just train because I like those guys, and it was just kind of fun to be a part of that group too. So but I have some great memories of, running in those hallways and trying to turn 9 degrees. And, if you have too much speed, you fly into a locker, or if you're racing someone to beat to that corner, you have to go around. And then there's, we had to jump down some steps.
Yep. So you're running indoors in a school. That's what you're training in.
Yeah.
You're not in a track indoors.
No.
You're not in a track outdoors.
Right.
You're in the hallways of a school running around the corners. That's your training in wintertime.
And the caretaker had polished the floors the night before. And it was just, that's what we had. So that's what we used.
And this is just before school starts.
Yeah. 7 to 8.
Yeah, and it was a 300 meter. We had a 300 meter loop though. It was a big school.
It was solid, yeah.
So yeah, it was. You used some decent intervals in there.
So is it correct to say, Steve and I were talking before, that there was a race, there was a medley relay that ended up, the 2 anchors were you and Byron at provincial championships one year?
Could you take us through that? Because we'll come back to it later, but take us through it.
Yeah, so that was grade 9 when that was the grade 9s could, run JV. I guess I still can. But so it was my first year at provincials, so I was going to had me run the medley relay and I think the 3,000, the 1,500. And so the very first event of the day was the medley relay. And it just worked out that both our teams are pretty equal.
And explain what the medley relay is. Explain what that event is.
So it was a 400, 4-2-2-8. So 400, 200, 200, 800.
Okay.
And we had a really good team that year. And Grant Park had a good team because they always do. And it just worked out that Byron and I got the baton at the same time, basically, at that time. And I actually think he had a bit ahead of me. I'm gonna memorize that part. So because I think I remember chasing him down. That's my memory of it. It's not true at all, I'm sure. But he ended up winning, and they broke the record. They set the record, and we were, just a few steps behind them. So that was the very. I think that was maybe the inaugural medley. It was pretty new. And that could have been the first year it happened.
And that's 1989. You do that.
That would have been 89, yeah.
Yeah, just missed setting the provincial record, and you get second.
And Byron gets the provincial record. Or Grant Park gets the provincial record with Byron as the anchor. And I guess we should tell our audience who Byron Goodwin is if they don't know Byron. Maybe through your words, how would you define Byron Goodwin?
Yeah, so without holding back, he was probably one of the greatest youth sports athletes. He went undefeated in youth sport in the 600 meters for over 5 years, won 5 600 meter championships.
Unheard of.
Broke the Canadian record that was just broken last year, actually.
Yep.
It went from 1995 to last year, almost
30 years. Yep.
All right. Without super shoes or super tracks. So he was instrumental in rallying the troops. And, in high school, he was just, no one would have probably predicted that. He was just another guy that was running well with the rest of us. And he just launched going to university.
Yeah, something happened there. And last year he raced Canadian Masters Championships and just decimated everyone in the 400. So Byron's still going strong.
Yeah.
I remember that 600.
Yeah, I think around.
I think he broke 50, eh?
So the 600 when he broke the Canadian records that we're talking about?
Yeah, well, no, I think last year as a Masters athlete, I think he went under 50 for the 400 indoors, which is insane.
Oh, that's not 53 or 54.
Okay.
Maybe.
I always exaggerate. But that 400 or that 600 where he ran 116 low.
116.1.
116.1. Simon Treppel was just turning the corner for second when he crossed the line, and Treppel ran something like 118.
And I was in 5th place in that exact race. I was in that race.
Oh, wow.
Got a real good view of him from across the track.
So let's go back. So you're in grade 9, 10 at Sisler. Things are going really well. By grade 12, Sisler is a provincial powerhouse. And we've got talent coming everywhere. What were the coaches doing there? What was that culture like when you're in grade 12 at Sisler?
I think if you look at any strong program, success breeds success. So people want to be part of success. They just do, and they'll drop whatever sport that they're doing that they might not having fun at, and they'll go somewhere else where they're having maybe more fun. And that was the case at Sisler. I think that we had just had this great group of runners. Relay teams were strong. And so kids that might want to play, usually maybe played football, were saying, I think I just want to run track, or playing soccer, so I just want to do track. And that's really kind of unheard of in most places, right? Just for kids, especially in Canada, where multi-sport athletes are kind of the king, and you get the odd kid just doing track full time. So that kind of snowballed in itself. And we had both girls and boys. We had some really strong athletes. So it really made I think, endurance sports are hard, right? Whether you're cycling, swimming, running. So if you don't have fun outside of the actual workouts, the program falls apart.
Yeah.
So when you have that built-in kind of fun, it makes it a lot easier to get kids to work hard.
And that's the one thing I remember being a grade 10 student. Like, you were sort of, I guess, our captain, and you were fun. You were a great guy. You were you were the MHSAA Provincial Athlete of the Year. Maybe you can walk us through provincial championships that year, where I think you were in 4 different events. But you were like the life of the party, and making sure everyone felt like they were part of the team, and creating that culture of we're all successful. It's not just about me being successful. We're all successful when the whole team wins.
Right. No, thanks. I appreciate that. But it was such a fun group, right? So I wasn't having to fake anything, right? It was just really fun group to hang out. And I think, it's funny because I remember we're training, and at every training run, they said, like, we had our workout days, and then our easy runs, we would actually, I don't remember this, John, but we would run to I think it was Nortel had a big factory back there, and they had this big green space. And we would run maybe half a mile and just play tag.
Yeah.
On that field there. And then we'd run back to the school after and pretend like we went for 5 miles, but we actually did. We just played tag, right? And made it a fun game. Yeah. So we weren't out there logging miles. We were just playing some tag and going from there. So I remember doing that multiple times, and all the easy day runs leading up to that. And one of the things that, when you play tag, and then we'd stop halfway through. I made sure we stop, and we'd have like a 50-meter race. Like, so we'd, work on our speed and so on. Yeah. So we would do that quite a bit. So leading into that, we'd gone to California during spring break. Evan and John took us down to San Diego for 10 days, I think, and we did a training camp down there, and saw, and then we went to this place called Jordan High School in Los Angeles, and they had security guards out because it was kind of just a couple blocks from Compton. Yeah. And but we had and so they had a gang fight a few days before, so the school had been closed. It was just this, and so I remember we're getting out of the van, and it's all these white kids. It was a fully black school, so we're like, Gladys Nordy was on the team, and Anthony Davis. And they're, you guys get out first. So we get out, and it ended up just being the nicest kids, like everything, right? Like, you put humanity. They were all scared to go in this place, and it was just all these super nice kids, and they're all like happy to have us there and stuff. So we ran a track meet down there. So that was actually a springboard to that, because we had this great training camp. Came back really fit and ready for provincials. So that year I ran the 4x4, the 800, and the 1500, and ended up winning all 3. And just, I remember Miles Reed won the 800 just before the 800 guy. And I think, we won the Sisler with Anthony Davis and Tony Cabral. We won the 100, the 200, the 400, the 800, the 1500, the 4x4, the medley. And then we were, I think, third in the 3,000, and we didn't win the hurdles. We were second in the hurdles. Second in the hurdles,
yeah. It was unbelievable. Like probably the top performance by a men's team in my memory. And so were you thinking when you're in California, is the team thinking, doing the math here and saying, well, Anthony can mop up the 2 and the 4. Tony might win the 100,
Mm-hmm.
Jeff's thinking, I think I could probably get the 8 and the 15. We also had a guy who was making croissants too, wasn't there? Very powerful Frenchman in the 8, wasn't there?
There was Christophe.
Yeah.
Bison. And Corey St. Nick. So I was first. Corey was third, and I think Christophe was 4th or 5th. But he should have actually. I thought he was going to be my biggest competitor. There's another guy from Grand Park, Sean Goho, that was second. He was a really good runner.
Right. So then all of these guys.
Oh, sorry. I have to actually interrupt here, because this is so the day before it was 35 degrees for the 1500. It was so hot that I remember just trying to get some shade. So I went underneath the stands at Penham Stadium, of course, in those just dirty, and I lied down on a bench. I remember just like, okay, just calm down, just like get out of the heat. And I remember hearing the bell for one of the races, and I thought it was the girls' race. I go, okay, I got at least 10 minutes. Let's go get my spikes on. So I walk over upstairs, and I go to get my spikes, and I look across the track, and my race is lined up.
Oh, no way.
Oh. Actually, the JV boys had finished, and the girls had gone before, and they were looking around, and the gun, and my coach, I think Evan maybe yelled or something, said, hold up, stop, don't, go. And then I remember I had to just sprint over there, put on my spikes as fast as I can, and my heart was racing, and the gun went off, and I went up the first lap in about 61 seconds because I was so fired up from that. And I remember hearing that split, and I thought, I just lost the race.
Yeah.
I'm going to completely die. And so I slowed it down, and then was able to outkick Tom Bima for the win, but I thought it was going down there.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
That's quite a story. Yeah, you're
incredible.
sprinting to the start line, almost missed it, and then you win the gold.
Yeah. And actually, there's a lot of history in the winner of the JV Boys 1500 as well, which maybe we'll touch on right at the end here. But amazingly, all of these kids from Sisler and Grant Park and all of these names end up on the same team at the University of Manitoba.
Now, before we get there, there's
Okay.
one additional part of this story that I think is important because I think both of you guys have shared this with me. But there was the culture in Sisler, but there was also a bit of a system and structure to get kids into track and field. And maybe take us through that, because I think, Jeff, that's maybe shaped a little bit of your coaching career later in life. But take us through that structure at Sisler.
Yeah, you know what? Like, even to this day, I remember reading this quote. I think it was Arthur Lydiard who said, there's champions walking in every hallway. You just got to identify them and get them out. And I just believe that so much. And so, I mean, we had such a positive culture that we would just encourage kids and try and get them out. And then the coach, you have to kind of go searching sometimes, because track's not a sport. A lot of kids, unless you experience a sport early on, I believe, in your life, there's always an entry barrier to get to it. Where if you've experienced something when you're young, if you did some track meets when you're just like, oh yeah, I'll do that. I've done that before. But if you've never done it, there's a little bit of fear that you have to jump over. And it's amazing what words of encouragement will do to conquer that fear, either from a coach or teammates. And, I think, Sisler did a good job of getting athletes out that may have success in certain events. And then we saw that they just thrived, and then it just kind of builds on itself.
Yeah, my recollection was guys on hockey teams, guys on football teams. I remember that there was almost a message from Evan saying, if you're on any varsity team, you have to do at least one track event or run one cross-country meet just to see. And there were so many smaller hockey players. We had this story the other day. Small hockey player goes to a cross-country meet and finishes in the top 5 and realizes, oh, wait a minute, I'm actually better cross-country than I am at hockey. Maybe I'll spend more time here.
Well, actually at Stonewall, when I was in grade 11, Andrew Town, do you remember that name at all? He actually was a hockey guy, comes out for cross country, and it wasn't Andrew Town. But anyways, and he won the JV boys, just a pure hockey kid, just comes out and just had this great runner.
Wins the provincial championships.
Straight out of hockey.
Wins the provincial championship, yeah.
Wow. And again, like we were just talking earlier with the guys at the radio station, we're all into sports academies now. Kids are specializing so early. Yeah. And there was such an important message about that training that you get in another sport, and if you get the right coach and the right atmosphere and the right culture, that you can transition, whether it's cycling or running or whatever. But don't specialize too early. Get in the different sports and see what's out there, and you never know where it's going to go.
100%. I learned a lot. I learned a lot actually from. I had my first job when I was at St. Paul's. I did the volleyball team. I coached volleyball there, and so I had to go on a coaching clinic. We went down to the Colorado Springs, and there was a head coach of the U.S. Volleyball team. His name was Hugh McCutcheon, and he said, every sport you play makes your main sport better.
Yep.
And they stopped recruiting. They said when we get guys who are too good at volleyball, they level off. And they start recruiting athletes, like just pure athletes. We said we can teach them to play volleyball. And they actually won the Olympics 2 years later from that mentality, the USA team.
Long-term athlete development starts with as many sports as you can play, and then you never know where you're going to end up when you're 18 or older. So the second thing that fascinates me in this transition is the names that we've all talked about here: Simon Treppel, Tom Bima, Byron Goodwin, Anthony Davis, yourself. you'll all end up going to the University of Manitoba, which you're a triple provincial champion. We talked to Suzanne Bin a little bit earlier about this as well. You would think that there would be some recruitment happening, that people would want to go to the U.S. and get into the NCAA system. But there was also a culture of staying in Manitoba, and that Manitoba was a center for excellence of track and field. So what was it like for you guys to think about graduating all around the same time and saying, what would happen if we're all on the same team?
Yeah, that was certainly played out really well for everybody. Because the thing about Manitoba is that, in the summer you go on trips, you go to Legion Camp, where you go on, they had these dual meets. So these guys, they weren't just guys that you saw at track meets, you actually travel with them. So they became, really good friends and you got really comfortable with them. We went to Minneapolis for the Jack Johnson, I think, race in grade 12. And I think I won the mile down there. And I remember Jamestown College and one other college coaches came to me and gave me their card and stuff. But, it was never even a doubt. Like I never even considered that I would go to the States. It was just like, no, I'm going to go to U of M. Like it wasn't even, and I think too, and even to this day, the U.S., they have a lot of guys. It's really hard to get down the States as a guy, unless, like the guys that went down to the U.S. for my year, Graham Hood, who, that's the right decision for him because he was already, world class. He could be competitive in the NCAA. Right. A lot of athletes go down to the NCAA just to die out, basically, because it's so competitive and we don't understand that in Canada, and I'll get into that later when I talk about kind of the NXN and all that stuff. But so yeah, we were excited. We thought, hey, we got all these good guys. Let's go to U of M. And I was actually training with George Tanner and Flying by the time. And then Claude picked up. Claude Brube started coaching, or he'd always been coaching, but he had Dean Gurney at the time. And then when Daryl came, he joined him. Then Simon joined him, and Tom came out of high school, and they all joined. So it took a little while, but eventually when I was doing workouts on my own, I'm like, I think I want to join that group. So I had to make a coaching change, which is always hard because, there's feelings involved and coaches feel hurt and so on. And George is a great guy and he'd taken me to coach me for a while. But, to see in this group and to be honest, I was probably more of a 1,500, 5,000 meter runner. Like if I, look at my ability, like I didn't have the big speed of Daryl, Byron, or Simon. I was, 51.400 meter guy, which now, that's just, it's not the big wheels that you need to be successful in the 800 and 1,500. And, but I wasn't going to not train with those guys because the opportunity was there. And I could have gone and just done long runs on my own and, repeats of mile repeats. But so I was kind of attracted to that group. So I certainly improved my speed, but it was never, a pure 800 meter runner.
Right. Can you tell us a little bit about what the training was like? You've told me some stories in the past about just how fit that group was. And you were coming off a legacy, right? The Bisons had won national championships in cross country in 88, 89. Huge legends in endurance running from Manitoba. Chris Webber, Chad Johnson, Darren Clausen had all graduated, and now you guys were stepping in. What was that culture like? What was the training like?
Yeah, so those guys, those guys were endurance beasts. Like those guys, they won U Sport. I'll call it U Sport. It was CIAU back then. Yeah. And they won U Sport cross country. Like those guys were pure 5, 10K runners with huge pace, and they could come down and run the 3,000, the 1,500 if they had to. Where our group was much more 4x4s, 600, 4x8 training. Mm-hmm. So we were on the track hammering intervals, and that was the 90s, right? The 90s, we'd never heard the word threshold before.
Yeah.
Right. It was all VO2 max, hard stuff. And then we were crushing intervals 3 times a week. And then when Byron joined our group, so Byron trained with Alec Gardner, and then he came and joined Claude's group, and he brought in this kind of a pure speed day. It's like, we got to work on our speed. So we would do that on Wednesday. So we were on the track 4 times a week.
Wow.
And for me, I look at my training drill and I look back and I have all these felt tired, felt sick, something's hurting. So it was hard training. And, so some guys adapted better than I did, for sure. I had pockets where I'd, really shine, but then, go back down to kind of mediocrity and so on. So it was just the times, there was times that was the training of the times. I think I looked at an NCAA stat, because I think every coach was doing this. I think in the 90s, it was like two guys or 3 guys in the NCAA were breaking the 4-minute mile back then. Where I think last year there was 150 guys, broke 4-minute mile as training kind of adapted. So So that was kind of the training. So it was hard and intense training for sure.
You really shone in cross country, though. You had some good cross country years, and so maybe that was a sign that you were more on the endurance side. And I seem to remember you telling me a story about doing tempo runs, 5K tempo runs, where this group of guys was all running around 3 minutes per K, and you were all really fit in that cross country season. So do you remember some of that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that was, I think it was like my fourth year, where, the training gone really well that fall. We were at the dump, and here's another thing. Like I'm a huge believer in hill training for distance runners, right? And unfortunately, Manitoba, we're so starved for hills.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, so the Garbage Hill is like a freeway on weekends, right? Every group, you got skiers there, you got cyclists there, you got, you name it, every group is there trying to do hill work because that's our only real training hill. And so we would go to Garbage Hill every Tuesday and do repeats on there. I remember just feeling really strong, and then we did a 5K tempo a week or 2 weeks before Canada West, and I think we all were. I was like 15:30, and there was a bunch of guys that were like we had 4 guys all between 15 minutes and 15:30. So we were going in there pretty fit to Canada West.
Unbelievable, so great. So with that, any the culture that Alex Gardner created, that Bruce Perney created, that it was Claude's early days as a coach. What are some of the things that you learned from what they brought to the U of M Bisons during those early 90s that you're now bringing into your own coaching career? Things that you embodied, let's say, as an athlete, or that you saw and thought to yourself, this is actually way different here at the University of Manitoba than it is at the U of A or at the U of S, that also had really big track and field programs.
Right. And that's interesting. So I think, you observe things, and certainly you put them intrinsically, but ultimately you have to coach to your own personality, right? Like you can't all of a sudden see someone go, oh, that's a great, I'm going to adapt to that if it's not really you. And I mean, and certainly Alec Gardner and Bruce, that they came from the sprinting and throwing point of view. And, but they brought that really big kind of team component like this, and they made, really brought that excitement about what we could do as a team, right? And everybody bought into that. It was like everyone was cheering everybody on. The points, 1 point was a big deal,
right?
And so I really appreciate that part. But I mean, like I'm much more as a coach, probably laid back than I said they would be. Like they were quite intense, which was good. I mean, some people thrived on that. I'm a little more just laid back personality wise. And so my modus operandi per se is I think one thing I really learned as an athlete is I just had ups and downs. Like I didn't have great races all the time. I was all over the map, always trying to figure out what it was. So I really kind of have empathy for athletes struggling and what that does mentally. And you put so much effort in and it just doesn't work out. And you're just like, well, that was just a big waste. When it's not, and so just being able to talk with athletes about those struggles. And so where, people who have, success all the time, maybe don't have that same empathy. So.
Right. There's a great quote that we heard Wednesday about that failures are the doors that you have to go through to find success. And just
that's good.
Just for our audience to understand about track and field, this doesn't happen in the Olympics, and I think most people's introduction to track and field is through the Olympics. But in the university sport, and I want to send a promo out because the U Sports Championships are here in Winnipeg, March 5th to March 7th. If you want to experience this 4x8 pandemonium, it'll be happening on the Friday night because 4x8s are Friday nights now. But in the team sport, every time you perform in the top 7, you get a certain number of points. And the higher up you finish, the more points you get. And one thing that I remember, and I don't know if you remember this, Jeff, well, you must remember this, is that it didn't matter what event was going on. The Bisons were surrounding the other members of their team. So I was here 4 years ago when CIs were happening, and we had 2 amazing high jumpers, and they're jumping for points, right? So the shot putters, the distance runners are all watching the high jump, cheering on their guys because that means 15 points for our team if we do really well. And U of M embodied that, and you can still, there's a legacy of that, Jeff, that's still here. That when I go to a track meet and watch it, that Bison culture of team sport, the track and field, while it's individual at one side, is such a team sport. That's still there from the days that you guys started that in the 90s.
That's cool to hear. And I think part of that is that most people who are going to U of M are already from Winnipeg or Manitoba.
Yep.
And are already going there. Where other schools, I mean, especially in the States, people are coming from all over the place. Right? There's very few kids that are from the hometown. I know in Ontario, it's quite normal for kids to go away to the university also. So it's a little bit harder to build that team chemistry when people are coming from all over the place. Where Manitoba people have raced each other, they know each other, been on provincial trips together, and so there's some history there already, and so it's easy just to get behind each other.
Yeah, it's really something to see. It's the same at the NCAA level, right? It's the same kind of competition style between universities. So strongly recommend all of our listeners, if you got time, come check out U Sports Championships.
And just any other stories from that U of M era that you want to share? Like we started off with that 1994 4x800, but any other stories before we kind of move on to a few other topics? Some other memorable moments from that era?
Yeah, just personally, I remember in 1995 or 94 in Edmonton when I'd run the 4x8 that night before and we won, and the next day I was running the 1,000, and I missed out in the fast heat. I was in the slow heat because so I ran that race, and I remember it felt super easy. I felt really good, really strong, and I ran from led most of it, and then just kicked home as best I could and won the race, and then went to go put on my shoes. And I'm just getting my stuff on, and then the fast race is going on. I'm watching it, and I think it was Rob Schwartz, who's a U of A guy, and then Scott Jensen, and then Daryl all came across the finish line. Daryl Fieldhouse, those guys came across 1, 2, 3, and then as one of the coaches from their team, the French team, comes up to me and goes, "Hey, I think you medaled." I'm like,
"No way!"
And he's like,
"From the slow heat,"
and he's looking at his watch, and I'm like, "What?" And then so we're waiting for the score, and then I missed a medal by 1/10 of a second, and I missed the gold by like 7/10 of a second, but it was fourth, so it was like came over with no hardware, but out of the slow heat, not even, and like obviously if I'd known that, I think I might have found another gear because I'm just thinking your slow heat is just you're not running for anything really. So anyway, so that was my one close call to getting an individual medal.
Do you remember the time? Do you remember how fast that went?
Yeah, no, it wasn't a fast year. I think guys were tired, and it was just like 2:29 or something. It wasn't very fast, but it was like guys were all just tired from the night before, doubling up the 4x8 and the 1500.
It's still sub 60 pace for 2.5 minutes. That's still super fast, and wow, that's amazing. That's really exciting.
One little thing before we move off of the U of M era, early on you talked about this race in Edmonton at the Butter Dome.
Yes,
which is a great name for a facility, the Butter Dome. It's kind of ricocheting in my head, but I feel like Manitoba should have like the Bison Dome, or something like that would be a good name. But Butter Dome is pretty cool. Anyway, sorry.
It's it's yellow brick, so it looks like a big stick of butter from the outside when you go in there, and it's not the fastest track. So 2:29 on that track in the era pre-super shoes is actually that's really solid. So well done. And then now you're bringing that passion and that experience as a coach. So is that the next chapter that we want to dive into?
Yeah, I think maybe take us through, like, obviously you had a career there, and maybe just also bridge the gap from your running career into coaching. But you've had, I would say, maybe 2 or 3 big coaching experiences, one with St. Paul's and Winnipeg, and then in Minnesota, and I think Minnesota has kind of evolved a little bit. You've had some interesting opportunities there, and some of the lessons you've learned and things you've tried to apply in all of that. And definitely when you go through St. Paul's, maybe complete the bookend of that medley relay story at some point.
Yeah, right. Well, I look back every once in a while, and I just think how blessed I was to be with, not just successful teams. Certainly that's part of it. It makes it more fun, but just, really good people part of those teams, and that always really makes the memories really, really nice. And then, when I was done track, my last year at track and field, Daryl Fieldhouse, Tom Beam, and I went to Australia for the winter. Went for almost 3.5, 4 months down to Canberra to train at the Institute of Sport down there. And it was just like, it was the year before the Pan Am Games. So it was leading up to the Pan Am Games, 1999 in Winnipeg. And I remember the last week we got invited. Graham Hood was down there with the Nike team. And he invited us to his village. They were in Melbourne, so we went and stayed with him for a week. And that was the greatest eye opener of my life, and that just in terms of where my ability was. Because I think as runners or athletes, you sometimes overestimate your ability. Sometimes we always believe, if I just get the right opportunity, if I just get this and this, and at some point you got to realize, I'm just not that talented. Right? I've done the best I could with what I was given. I maximized it, but I'm just not as good as those guys. And this was the ultimate eye opener of just like, so in that training camp, like Bob Kennedy from the USA, he had just left, so we were actually taking his place. There was Noah Nien, who was Olympic silver medal, pushed El Garouge to a world record in the mile there.
These are huge names Coleman. In the sport.
Oh, it was the who's who of it was Kim McDonald was the group leader of that, and I think Daniel Coleman was there. Like it was like just crazy, and so we spent a week with Graham, and I just saw what he did, and he even said, "Hey, you want to look at my training journal?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like that's like a dream come true for someone." Like I remember going through his training journal and just going, "How is that even possible? Like how is it even possible? 8x400 starting at 58, ending at like 53, kind of thing like that. 8x800 starting at 203, going down to 158, like just with 90 seconds rest." And just seeing, they're running 100, 120 miles a week on top of this, like just everything about it was that you realize that you have to be talented, durable. And I didn't have that durability, and just the speed at which those guys, it was just off the charts. Now, Kim McDonald, he trained those guys to break world records. He had a stable of 12 to 15 athletes where he probably knew half of them would get injured, and half of them would break world records. Right? That was the system they were under. And I mean, and Graham was on the fortunate side of some injuries back then. He had, obviously crazy talented Canadian record holder, multiple events, and so seeing how what they lived. So after that trip, I was ready to retire. I was just like, that was awesome. I can just run for fun and take all the pressure off, and that's what I did. I just ran for fun after that, and just was able to just take off those kind of. And it was actually an interview with Graham. Actually, so I read in Canadian Running where it said they asked him if he had any regrets because he had come 9th in the Olympics as an 18-year-old, ran 3:33, but then had all these injuries. And they said, you were like world class, like you could have been world record holder, Olympic champion. And I think it was he that said, you got to be really careful, and it's kind of dangerous to go into that regret phase. Says you kind of have the experiences and be happy with it, because he says ultimately the only people that would be happy would be a world record holder or Olympic gold medalist, and that, if that's what you live with.
Wow.
And so great. I kind of, that's a good way to look at that. Just got, there's only two runners that are going to be happy in this world.
Yeah, that's super advice, because I mean we're doing this podcast to learn some of these lessons from endurance sport.
That's a great one.
And as a commentator and interacting with other commentators, it's like, oh, they're going to be a star of the future. Oh, and they're extrapolating everything. And I know at the Junior World Ski Championships, you were like, you know what? Celebrate this moment. Like, you don't know where everything's going, and you've just got to put everything into it, see how far you go, and celebrate that. So that's really, really strong advice that we can pull from talking to you, Jeff.
And the memories, right? Like the journey, and the memories. The journey and the memories.
Which is really what we're getting into in this podcast.
Yeah, yes. Exactly. Like they stick with you forever. It's great that Graham said that. Because he had an illustrious career at the University of Arkansas.
So
little known tidbit. Born in Winnipeg before he left. So, anyways, what you were going to say something about Graham?
Yeah, well, we actually claimed Graham when he won the gold medal at the Pan Am Games in 1999, right? They said Winnipegger.
Yeah, nice.
But yeah, I was going to say, so he won the NCAA championship in the 1500, and then he actually lost the indoor one to Kevin Sullivan, of all things, and they're Canadian.
Yeah.
And, he was 20 years old, and he went to the Olympics, comes 9th. Who would have thought that would have been his last Olympics, right? You extrapolate, and you think, he's going to be Olympic world champion. Now, he never came back. I think he was injured 96, and then same thing in 2000.
Yeah. Got to appreciate every moment that you're at the height of where you're at is a good lesson.
And appreciate the journey.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, you got to love the journey.
Yeah. So keep going, Jeff. Now, you had this running career, and it was actually quite interesting how you talked about how you kind of came to that decision to retire from the sport. But now moving into your coaching.
Yeah, so my coaching foray really began, funny enough, in volleyball, because when track was kind of done, I was like, I need a break from track. I just need to be away from the track. I kind of lost some passion for it a little bit. So I started just getting, I played volleyball in high school, really loved the sport. So I always had this, I guess one of my strengths maybe is I've always recognized my weaknesses. And I always said, I never tried to pretend that I was better than I was in coaching. So right away I said, I want to learn volleyball. So I contacted Russ Paddock, who was, captain of the Canadian Olympic team in 1992.
Yeah.
Now is out in Brandon. Phenomenal. And he was actually in education with me. And he ended up actually playing senior men's hockey with me at one point when I was just, doing some record stuff. So I asked him if I could just be his assistant coach. And he said, yeah, sure. So I assistant coached with Russ. And that was just, phenomenal. You just, you're learning from the best. And so I did that for a year and then ended up coaching at Oak Park for a year. And then I got hired at St. Paul's. And when the deal was they were looking for a varsity coach. And so I'm like, yeah, I've got some experience. And I wouldn't have had that kind of confidence I had coached with Russ. And then I talked to Jules Martins, who was another, Canadian Manitoba great volleyball player. I said, Jules, I need some help. And Jules came on and assistant coached me or helped me out, and was just a great coach there. And we took a team that was nothing, and we made them competitive. And then that group, we had Lloyd Voth, his son came through, and ended up winning 2 provincial championships back to back. My coaching career. Then that was, a big highlight. And then once that happened, I was like, I want to take this, what I've learned, and start coaching track again. And I'd been helping out with St. Paul's in the cross country and been doing that a little bit, but I wanted to just go full bore. So then I kind of went full bore into the cross country team and took a team that was, had some outside coaches, and it's really hard to build a program when you're outside coach because you don't have contact with the students. And I was on every corner of that hallway poking kids in the chest saying, hey, you're going to run some cross country. I know you play soccer. I know you do this. I know you play hockey.
Yeah.
And, and I ended up getting about 40, 50 kids out for cross country.
Wow.
Which is, in Manitoba, that's a big number when so we would go to our WAC cross country races and half the field would be, St. Paul's kids. And it was just, and they really ended up just enjoying being there. And I think, it was, I don't remember who said this, but it was Joe Newton. So Joe Newton is a famous coach at York High School in Illinois, and I read his book and so on. And he had 250 kids on his cross-country team. It was called the Long Green Line because when they ran, it just stretched out forever. And he said, every kid has to feel like they're loved, and he used those words. He said, they have to feel valued, and they have to know that if they miss, that they are missed if they don't show up.
Right.
He says, if you give a kid confidence, they'll do anything for you. They'll run through walls for you. And so he had this thing where he shook every kid's hand and said their name. Thanks for coming out today. By end of practice, 250 guys would line up and he'd shake every kid's hand.
Wow.
I remember really being inspired by that. So I'd institute that. I would have every kid, before they leave, they would have to shake their hands. I'd say, thank you for coming out today. By you being here, if only one kid showed up, that kid would want to go home. But by everybody being here, you make it fun and make it want to be here. So it creates that energy, right? Every person brings that energy. So we create really good culture there. And then I don't remember how many provincial championships we won because that was kind of the I guess the outcome of a really good product.
Right.
I know, but I think there was only one year in 20 years that we didn't win a provincial championship in cross country, like either a JV boy or varsity boy program.
That's awesome. And
now, and I'll go on to say that we were. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, keep going. No, you finish what you're saying.
What I wanted to do was we were kind of we were a big fish in a small pond. And I recognize that. We were private school. We had kids that, we had some discipline, some motivation, maybe, so I want to recognize that it's not equal everywhere. But so I started going to the States every year. We'd go down to Duluth or Minneapolis to a big race called GRIAC. And just to show our guys that, wow, cross country is big. And we'd go to these races and there'd be, 2,000 kids or more at these races and with team tents and just gear decked out. And we just get crushed down there. And so it was a eye-opening that, yeah, we were good, but we weren't that good in the big scheme of things. We were just good in a very small pond. And we would be in like the AA class. And we'd finish, if there's 27 teams, we finished 13 or 14. It's the middle of like the AA classes. And I remember there was a team from Wayzata that would show up and they would bring like 4 buses for their team. I remember them coming off and they'd set up this circus tent for their team, like this massive tent because they'd have, so many kids and they would have in the JV race, they'd have, 13 of the first 15 kids, and they'd have in their JV race, they'd have, the first 10 kids would be, sub 17:30, kind of thing like that for the JV category. So I'm like, this
for
is
5K,
just kind of get my eyes open to kind of how big things were. Yeah, 5K. Yeah, 5K.
Wow, that's awesome. And I think you should give yourself a little bit of credit, because St. Paul's was never known as a running powerhouse in the province. And also, kids aren't going to St. Paul's to run. Like you're getting them onto the team and creating that culture and that mass participation. And also what Joe Newton said, and I feel this in the way you describe your teams, is that the whole team matters more than the top two guys. And so many coaches focus on those top two athletes and not the rest of the team. But I think the top two guys end up being better if the whole team is doing well. Like all boats, like rises all boats kind of situation.
You're so right there, John, because I'll give you a quick antidote. We were at a Nordic race, and Nordic racing is really big down here too. And there was a coach that he brought his athlete there because the rest of the team was on a field trip. And he said, my athlete, he was talking to me after, he's saying, this girl is unbelievable. And today she had the worst race of the year. And it's because her team wasn't with her. Oh. He says, you have no idea the impact of having a team and supports and make it fun and relax. And when you show up by yourself, it's like you're missing half your energy that you don't have. And that was like a really good reminder how, and I use that when I talk to the kids about how that story, about how important it is that, you show up, right? When you show up, it matters. And I'll just end the St. Paul's story a little bit that, when I was getting ready to take a sabbatical, I'd been at a tribute dinner at St. Paul's. They honor somebody every so many years, and Steve Chipman was getting honored. And he was talking about in his speech about how, we did some coaching at Calvin and so on. So after the speech, I went up to him and I said, take this as a sign, but I think you should start coaching again with me at St. Paul's. And then we left it at that. And then just before the season that next year, I got a phone call from him saying, it's been resonating with what you said, and I think I want to, coach with you. So Steve came out and was just a great addition, like just that, once again, understands the community, the team feel. And then so when I took my year, what was going to be a year, I was so comfortable with him taking over, and he hasn't missed a beat. He's actually done such an amazing job with getting kids out and making them all feel important.
Nice. Yeah, that's really cool. And just to finish off, before we jump away from St. Paul's, why don't you finish off St. Paul's with the medley relay story, and then move into your next stage of your coaching career?
Yeah, so the medley relay was pretty. It was. I'm trying to think what year it was now.
This was about a little over 3 years ago. 3 years ago, I had to witness this moment from a really cool perspective. Yeah, 2022.
Yeah, so it's probably 4. Okay, yeah. So my son, my oldest son, and Hayes and Hudson, they were in grade 9 and 10 at the time at St. Paul's, and and we also had another guy, Noah Neves, who was really fast at the time. Actually, I'm not sure if he had run 152 yet indoors, but he had a couple of Printer records, and so he was gearing up. And I said, I looked at the medley record and went, guys, I think we could really beat this record. I think it's one of the ones that could happen based on what I see here. And so we said, okay, let's take a shot at this. I had enough guys to run the 4x4. I said, you'll run the medley, and then you'll do the individual event. Steve was there that night.
And just to be clear, that record that you're talking about is the 1989 record that Jeff McMillan missed out as Byron Goodwin passes him into the finish.
Yeah.
And so that record has stood for 33 years. And Jeff's looking at this record going, wait a sec, maybe this is the year.
It's not just some random record. There's a personal touch to this record. Yeah.
Can I give my perspective on this? Because
absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm at this day, and I have no idea of this history of this record, nothing. It's a nice day. I'm going to come out. I know Jeff's coaching. I know he's got fast kids to race. I'll just come and kind of watch it with him and just experience a great, cool sporting, sports event. And Jeff quietly turns to me as we're sitting there on the grass, and he says, Steve, I think my team can break the medley relay record. And this is a record that stood for 33 years. But if these guys run this relay to try and they can win it, no question, but to run it to go for the record, they may jeopardize their individual races. And I could see Jeff did not want to put the pressure on these kids to try and do this, but we could both realize this is an historic record. And then I get a little more of the story that this is a record that Jeff just missed out on setting. And I'm like, okay, make sure this isn't an ego-driven thing, which it wasn't. I mean, it definitely wasn't. But I remember we were talking about it. It's I think we came to an agreement. They've all got to agree that they're going to go for this record. They have to buy in. It's not like someone telling them. They have to go buy into it. Mm-hmm. And so Jeff's going to call this meeting together. And then I walked away, and I came back 20 minutes later, and I'm like, hey, did you guys talk about the relay? And they're like, we're going for the record. We're going for the record. Yeah. And we have to. So I don't know. That was my perspective. So maybe, Jeff, you take it from there.
Yeah. And it was a good group of guys. And so Hayes, my son, he opened the 400. He ran the first leg, and I think he was 52 points. And then we had two 200-meter runners. And the 200, it's not won or lost at 200 meters. I mean, the 200 meters, even though you want some fast guys, the race is won the 800 meters, right? It's over half the race, distance-wise and time-wise. And so we fortunately had a really strong 800-meter runner. So we got the baton, well clear. And then Noah, I was just like, let's see what he does. Yes, if he runs, he need to run at 2:04, I think, to break the record, 2:06 maybe. So I thought he'll probably run 2:03, and we'll get the record by a few seconds. And so he runs the first lap, and my watch, I'm like, I didn't understand what was going on, because I'm like, wait a second, I couldn't compute because it was way faster than what I thought we should run, and I hadn't had those. And then so he ended up running 1:58 in that relay, and we broke the record by 9 seconds, I think it was.
Wow. Something like that. It was shattered the record.
Yeah, I'm not sure it was 9, but it was a big record. So yeah, it was pretty fun to see, my son be part of that team there. That was kind of exciting. And just the other guys, I think it was Ethan Robson and I can't remember I know his face, but it was.
And what I'll do, Jeff, is
really, really good guys.
In the bio for this episode, I'll link the video of that race. We made a little video of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, they broke that 33-year record that Jeff almost made with Sisler, and instead Grant Park and Byron Goodwin took that record. So yeah, that's a really cool ending to that. There's so many stories we could talk about, but that phase of your coaching. But now you've taken this sabbatical and you head to Minnesota. Mm-hmm. Take us through just a few stories there of how that kind of evolved, because you're not going there as a coach, you're going there for other purposes, but you end up getting very deep into coaching at a high level.
Yeah, so my wife and I were just kind of getting restless in life, as sometimes you do when you've been in the same job for over 20 years. And we just said we just need to shake things up a bit. So I said, how about we just go to Minnesota for a year? And she fortunately had a U.S. citizenship. She was born. She spent 2 months of her life there because her dad was doing her residency, and when she was born. And so we looked at a number of different places, and someone had just moved from there and said, well, you should move in this area. In Plymouth, we just moved right from there. And so we ended up, just based on their recommendation, knew nothing about the stuff, and just ended up in Plymouth, and our kids were going to go to, and actually, one of the reasons we come down, not to sabbatical, and we'll get into this later, is we started this kind of hobby ski business that we run, and we thought this would be a great chance to introduce our ski wax, because Minnesota is outside of Norway, is one of the biggest kind of ski wax consumers. So we kind of thought we'd do a little bit of that. And so we put our kids in Wayzata High School, and it was just a mind-blowing world difference. And number one, just and I'm not saying athletes are better in the States, because I think Canada has just some incredible athletes. As we interviewed Adam Smith and Soren and so on. There's just so many more kids.
The numbers are so big.
You have 10 times the population. Yeah, and it's not just 10 times the population. It's 10 times the middle class, which draws so many more athletes out of that area, right? Mm-hmm. And so Wayzata is a massive school. It's got 4,000 kids, and their cross country team, boys and girls, they have 2 separate teams. They don't have anything together. They're 2 separate programs, and they both have between 8 to 120 kids on their cross country teams. And so when we send our kids to that program, we were just like, just hopefully get on the JV team there and just run, because I had no expectations for kids. I knew this this team had won state the year before, and they had 5 guys under 16 minutes for their 5K for a high school team, which is really, really substantial. And then the girls team had the second best girl in the nation. She'd run 16:40. Abby Nekaneki, who's at University of Colorado right now. So we're kind of coming into the big leagues. Like, I'd watch YouTube videos of this. I'm like, this is incredible. And as the season progressed, I was just a dad. It was fun just to watch as a dad again, like not having to worry about getting the athletes all ready. I was just a step back. And as it turned out, Hayes really thrived in that program. There's a lot of really good training, a lot of threshold training, a lot of really good, smart training. And with 120 kids, they didn't want a lot of injuries. So they really were smart, didn't want to overtrain their kids. So, you hear about these kind of big volumes. There was maybe 30 miles a week, which is for the high school program. In Canada, that'd be a lot. But for the States, when you hear some programs doing 60 miles a week, this was only half of that. So anyways, long story short, Hayes ended up making his way to the varsity team, ended up running 15:50 that year in the 5K.
Wow.
And so we got to go to one state. We got to go to NXR, which is the Nike Cross Regionals. And that's 7 states from the Midwest. Go there, the Heartland is called. So it's North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, and Kansas are the 7 states. And it's just this monster meet. This past year, I think there was 6,000 kids at this meet. And it's just cross country. Like, it's just mind boggling. They have, every race has 500 kids in it. And there's 5 boys and 5 girls races, and then the championship race is at the end of the day. So there's 12 races in total, and the boys end up winning that race. The boys end up boys, so they got to go to NXN, which was the Nike Cross Nationals, which is a Super Bowl of running for high school kids, where they treat these kids like it's unbelievable. How they treat these kids.
Yep.
So there's a strong rule in Minnesota that you can't coach outside the season. So once the season's done, and you can't have contact with your kids. So one of the coaches asked me, he just says, Jeff, are you wanting to coach this team till nationals for the next 3 weeks and go to Nike Nationals? And I mean, I was just like, I couldn't believe it, right? I had no expectation of this at all. Like, it was just like floored me that I was able to have this opportunity. So I coached the boys for the next 3 weeks, and they gave me some guidance on what they wanted to do. And I was completely fine with that. I mean, it was their team. I was just going to implement what they did. And then we went to Nike Nationals, where, it's hard to describe. Like you get on this coach bus and you go to the Nike World Headquarters, and they have all their professional runners giving you tours. So the who's who of running is there. And, so that's where, Cole Hawker, Grant Fisher, Cooper Tier, and then all the top girls are there. And then Donovan Brazier, like, it was just Matt Centrowich, like all these, famous U.S. runners and so on, were just lined up to take kids on jogs.
And these names that you're talking about, this is before the 2024 Olympics, where Cole Hawker wins gold in the 1500, and Grant Fisher wins 2 medals, in whatever, the 5,000 and 10,000.
Yeah.
So, but they're still they're the biggest names in North American running, and they're on the cusp of greatness. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you're these athletes are just giving you tours around, and you're just interacting with them like everyday people. A
bit of a throwback to your time in Canberra when you ran into Kim McDonald and the crew there.
Yeah, and it's crazy, because I consider myself a good high school runner, mediocre university runner, and to kind of get this experience. And so whenever I'm in those environments, I just want to learn. It's just like, okay, I just want to suck knowledge from people.
So good.
And so I can bring it back to where I am. So it just happened that when they went on a run, it was raining, and Cole Hawker was, I guess, waiting for the next group, but there was like a big delay. So I'm like, man, I'm taking this opportunity here. So I walk over and I just start chatting with him, and had a good 25, 30-minute chat, and just asking about his training, about his development, all this stuff, and just picking up some really neat things. And so one of the things I picked up from him that was really neat is that, he was a really low mileage guy in high school too. Like, he said he never ran more than 30 miles a week. And he says, I did a lot of speed development, really working, keeping, and this, I think, the big thing in distance running, especially distance runners really don't spend enough time running speed. Like, you got to be fast. Like, at the end of the day, you got to be fast. You got to be able to kick someone down at the end of a race, no matter what pace you're running. And so to be able to And I had done a little bit of that. I had, during track season, I have like one dedicated day where we train like sprinters, my distance runners. But this kind of gave me more insight, okay, what I could kind of adapt. And the other thing that was really interesting is that he does a ton of cross training. He actually trains more like a triathlete. He's on the bike, like a road bike, a ton. I'm not sure if he swims as much. I know Nick Simmons did a ton of swimming. But, and what I learned was when these guys who are really confident in their abilities, they're not following anybody. They're not looking through training logs and, I should be doing this. This guy's doing this. They create their own training program of what works for them. And I think that's the next really stage in athlete development, is that when you get to the point where, okay, I'm not going to follow somebody else's program. I know what works for me. I know my body. I've been look at the signs, and I'm going to implement what I think works for me. And I think as a coach, I really kind of adapt what I look for kids and go, okay, that didn't really work for that kid. I don't think a one-size training program works all. You need to have, so I've actually got 3 different kind of training groups I work with, and I learned this from Steve Jim. I got my fast group, I got my faster group, and I got my fastest group.
Nice.
And they're all doing different things based on what I think they can do. So that was really awesome. And then obviously the next year he wins the Olympic champion. And I think, my talk inspired him.
Yes, good for you. Good for you. Good for you.
Right. Nice. Nice. Yeah.
That is a typical Winnipeg news story.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Bring it back to Winnipeg.
Yeah. Without you talking to him, he's not even on the podium at the Olympics. So yeah.
Can I just ask? So like you went through the Peter Coe, Seb Coe style training in the 90s, right?
Yeah.
4 days a week on the track, super high intense. It broke a lot of people. How is this different from that?
Yeah, like this. So I was amazed that, especially at Wayzata, they did everything. They did so much threshold work, right? Like there was just nothing at race pace. It was all aerobic development. And then they race enough down here. Like every week they have a race, so they're getting their VO2 max work in the races and so on. But it was just a lot of easier stuff where they would recover every day and feel like they're not sore. And that's kind of, when I started getting into, like, I didn't go back, but I started doing some, triathlons and duathlons, and I'd read Jack Daniels, the running formula, really, really good book. And then I'd read a bunch of different books. Brad Hudson had a good book. I was kind of consuming coaching books and then implementing my own training to feel. I always think I need to do a workout before I give it to my kids to work out. I need to know what it feels like.
Great.
Understand it, and then so that I can modify it and so on. And I just felt, with the threshold training, and you got to be careful, like, with the Jakob Ingebrigtsen double thresholds, everyone's jumping on that bandwagon, right? And certainly there's some unbelievable stuff that can happen, but if you're not hardwired that way, right? Like he's more of an endurance athlete, where Cole Hawker's he's got springs, like he's got springy athletes. So him hammering thresholds and, he's not activating his strength, which is his speed and so on. So we recognize that he does a little more faster stuff, still gets his aerobic, gets all his endurance on the bike. So he's fresh on his workout days. His legs are ready to go.
Oh, that's great.
So
that's so good.
Yeah, no, and I think that was a big lesson that you were trying to talk about there, is just, that next stage of athlete development where you start to, you've got to figure out what works for you. And I think we saw that with some of the other athletes we've talked about, is just finding that right training. And there's so many dimensions to that, whether it's the environment, the type of training, the psychology aspect of it, the fun aspect. But
they know themselves. At a certain point, you know yourself, right?
Yeah, I think it's knowing yourself, but also, trying to there is that trial and error that you've got to reflect on and learn from, and be able to have that confidence to say, I'm going to do things a bit differently because I found these things work for me, is kind of the message I'm getting from you, Jeff.
For sure. And funny enough, that night, so after I talked to Cole for a while, that night we were waiting, like my son and I, and all of a sudden we look and there's Grant Fisher standing beside us, and he's waiting for someone else. So I'm like, hey, there's another opportunity here. So I start talking to him and chat for him for 15, 20 minutes. And same thing, he was with the Bowerman Track Club, which was the big track club. Wasn't working out for him. So he actually went back to his high school coach and then started having that more success again, and located in Park Center, or Park City, I think he is now.
Yep.
But he just, once again, knew his system, knew his body, knew what worked for him. And actually, when I was hanging out with all these high school coaches, there's a guy named Doug Souls, and Doug Souls used to be the coach at Great Oak, which was a massive powerhouse in California, and then went on to Harriman in Utah, which has one NXN for the last bunch of years. And I sat on the bus with him for 2 bus rides for 40 minutes, actually, and just picking his brain, because this is crazy. And this is what kind of blew my mind away, too. When he was at Great Oak, they had a $100,000 sponsorship from Nike high school. So they would get he showed me pictures of just there are rooms full of shoes that they would have. And so when he went to Harriman, so it's at altitude, it's in Utah, and they get the first class of every day. So they get 90 minutes of the day in their school schedule. That's a track cross-country class. And this is the same thing down in South Lake Carroll in Texas. They get the same thing in the theater schools, where they actually have a track cross-country class as part of the curriculum. So he gets training time in the day. So he says, yeah, we usually do our workout in that morning, and then we do another run after school to get that. So they're doing double days in high school, and he said we would run about 65 miles a week. So, I mean, in my mind, I was thinking, wow, so you're running 65 miles a week in high school, doubles. Where do you go from there, right? You're already doing altitude training, running 65 miles a week.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're running these amazing times. And so it's a double-edged sword there. It's like, in one way, you get these kids to perform incredibly well. They're running national championships. They're probably getting some scholarships at schools, but they're certainly reaching their ceiling really quickly, right? They're not improving a whole bunch after high school. And maybe that's okay for a lot of kids, where I kind of have the philosophy where I don't want their best race to run in high school. I want their best race to happen in college, outside of college or whatever. Like that's kind of my philosophy is I'm going to develop them on certain things, but I really want them to blossom when they leave me.
Oh, that's so great. And we talked to Sue Bin about this. Like, one of Sue's best races where she made it onto the national team was after she had her first child in her early mid-30s. And we miss that opportunity to get kids to that point if they're burnt out by high school. If we go through the list of national cross-country championships and look at those junior races over 20 years, how many men and women finish in the top 5, top 10, and you don't even recognize those names because they went nowhere after that. They're just burnt. They were trained specifically to get to that point, and the coaches, we heard about this the other interview, the coaches, maybe their egos were driving this. They push the kids too far. They burn out mentally, they burn out physically, and we never see it again. So it sounds like well, first off, Grant Fisher owes maybe his medal to 20 minutes with you on the side there.
Right.
But it also sounds like...
I was going to say that, but I thought...
You don't want to take all the credit.
All the credit, yeah. But also you've taken these messages to heart, right? And like that's how you're bringing these really important long-term development principles into your own coaching and to your own athletes.
Yeah, and just one additional thing, like, there is that aspect of burnout and so forth that gets people out of the sport, but it is that regular improvement that keeps you in the sport.
Yeah.
Right? True. And I think that's like when you said sometimes it's not necessarily burnout, but you've made these huge improvements, and those subsequent improvements are just so hard relative to those huge improvements. So just kind of taking that more long-term approach to say, how do we get someone so every year they're improving, and that can be enormously motivating. I think that's just a quick little lesson I've taken from you, Jeff, just what you said there.
Yeah. And the other, really great coach that I heard, and he was, controversial, but I went to a coaching clinic with Alberto Salazar when he was doing a coaching clinic in Vancouver, and this was just before Galen Rump, medaled at the Olympics, and he was coaching, and he gave us a coaching seminar where he basically did the life cycle of Galen Rump. He took us from where he found him to where he took him, and he said, really interesting, he says, I've coached him for 9 years, and talk about kind of providence, where his son was going to school, and they asked him, do you want to be the cross country coach? We're looking for someone, and so we got this kid in the soccer team that looks pretty fast. They were doing 200 repeats, and he was running them under 30 seconds. And he's like, oh, that's pretty fast. I'll take a look. And that happened to be Galen Rupp, right? This merger just happened to be, him. And same way, so he coached him. But what he said was, I never tried to get more out of him in a season than we could. We always could have got more out of a season, but we always wanted to leave something left on his legs. And I always remembered that, but their expression leaves the meat on the bone kind of thing, right? For each season, you don't need to maximize every season. If the kid didn't PR, have the great, that's okay. There's always next year that you can get those things.
Nice.
Now you're coaching, like you were a dad and you kind of, you stepped into this kind of like, hey, you want to like coach this team at the high, at the national Nike cross country championships. But now you've actually moved into a true coaching role in Minnesota. So maybe take us through a little bit of what you're doing now with that. And then we can also go into your ski wax entrepreneurial role.
Yeah, I've got to be a little time conscious because I do have a class in about 15 minutes here. So
sure, that's all good. Yeah,
I'll be yeah. So after that stint, I was like, well, I feel like coaching again. I really enjoyed that stint with Wayzata, and then the next year I ran a clinic between sports. So kids would do Nordic skiing, and then they jump into track, and there was this lag where they're super fit, but their legs weren't really ready, and some kids got injured and so on. So I offered this little camp to get kids ready from Nordic into track, and the kids really liked it. They loved it. They wanted it. So then at the time, my wife got a job at Province Academy, which is a private Catholic school, just actually down the street from Wayzata, literally just a kilometer down the street. And at the time, the phys ed teacher ended up leaving, so they asked me if I wanted to do that, and I'm like, okay. And then it just happened that the track coach was leaving the distance coach and the cross country head, so I ended up getting both the cross country and track coach position. And that was, it was such a neat thing because I'd kind of been preparing for this, but like nothing's like the intensity of a U.S. program, right? People are all in. Like it's, there's kids don't miss practices. Like when they sign up for track, they're going to be there every single time. They're not doing 20 different sports. They are like, and it's just the nature of everything so competitive that you kind of, there are some kids that have done it at a young age, kids do sports, but when they get to high school, actually I should backtrack. They divide seasons really concretely. So cross country starts August 15th and ends November 15th. And that's it. And then the winter sport goes from November to March, and then the spring sport. So kids actually can do multiple sports without the pressure of coaches saying you need to be here for this practice. No, you can't actually. So the rules are you can't have contact with them in those seasons so they can do other things.
Yeah, so they do. Now, they do maybe one
question.
sport at a time, but over the course of the year they might do 3 or 4 sports. Is what you're kind of getting at. They have that structure set up so they can do that.
Yeah, so most kids in the endurance sports will run cross country, do Nordic skiing, and then do track and field. That's the environment I was in with our kids, and really good communities and really neat. So last year I took over the head distance program, and at St. Paul's, people were just happy that you were there. People that didn't really know track, so you could do stuff and no one would really question you. They just kind of believe that you. Well, here you had to prove yourself a little bit, right? Kids, they know track and field. They know certain workouts, and they have kind of a little more history and stuff. So I was really prepared. And the other thing is I see the kids every day. So even at university, we'd only train Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. And then the other days you're on your own. Where, here I was seeing kids for 2 hours a day, Monday through Saturday. Like it was 6 days a week.
Wow.
You're seeing their kids. Like it was like a full college program basically you're running with meets every single week. And so, we're a smaller school. We have 120 kids on the track team. So I have about 40 distance runners. Whereas, Wayzata, they have 500 kids on the track team last year. They had 250 boys, 250 girls. They have to literally schedule track time for when the workouts are because they have a schedule because there's so many kids.
Wow.
And, so I just everything that I've learned in my days, I was able to put in, and we just had a real solid year. So there's 36 kids, and 35 of them set lifetime PRs. But that wasn't the goal. The goal was to kind of create that, community and everything that I talk about in this podcast, was put into practice, but more so because it was every single day. It's
Right.
kind of easier to, when you coach, see the kids 3 times a week. It's kind of easy to kind of come and show up. When you're there every single day, you have to have a message that make them want to be there and make it purposeful. So I spent a lot of time doing that and telling stories, from my days with Clifford Greaves, who I'm sure Johnny wanted to bring up there. I had,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and that's really cool. Like you've taken all these lessons that you've learned and trial and error and so forth, and you're putting that together in this program now. And I can feel so much excitement in your voice, and knowing you as a friend when you get excited like that, you're in that right space that is just, the right thing for you to be doing.
Yep.
Now, we don't have much time because you got to run to a class and teach, but in a 5 minutes, you become a ski wax entrepreneur. And this is 10 years. This is the last 10 years that has happened here. Maybe, I don't know if you can, in a few minutes, kind of tell people what you've kind of got to in the ski wax world.
Yeah, you know what? Like once I was kind of done running, I'd always liked skiing as a cross training, and then when I started having more time, I just kind of fell in love with it. It was such a beautiful sport. Like it's just, out in winter, like there's no, it makes winter enjoyable. But what I was fascinated was that with fast skis, you could do better than your ability, right? In running, you're stuck. You put on, there's nothing. I mean, nowadays a super, everybody has, but when I was researching all this waxing stuff, it's like, wow, if you nail the wax, you can actually, really do crazy well. Like it's almost like it's a gift. So my mind kind of, I've become obsessed with certain things. I think runners generally have obsessed with compulsive things, become fixed on things. So yeah. I just become obsessed with ski wax and trying to learn as much as I could. And, at the time, being at Statue of St. Paul's, we had this fleet of like 30 skis. I had to wax them every year to get ready. So I would just wax, and I'd practice on all these just kind of gym skis, and then kind of learned reading stuff. And it was, it's hard to learn about ski wax because a lot of times it's kind of secretive. People don't advertise what they do. But there's this basic kind of stores that would show stuff. And then, so I tried it myself, and I eventually got what I thought was pretty decent. And then I ended up waxing Steve's skis for there was a couple things, but I'll get into that in a second because when he won the Vasa law. But and then so I became then the World Cup was coming to Canada for the first time, and Steve and I said, okay, we got to get there. And so we were going to go, and then I applied to be this coach for a day with Team Canada. So that way it was kind of a coaching thing, and I could, use it to get out there for my school because it was a part of the coaching. And the deadline had passed, like way gone. And so I just emailed the person saying, listen, I'm going to be out there. I really want to join this clinic. There's nobody from Manitoba that would be there. And so, it's one thing in life too I've learned is you got to show up sometimes, even if, doors are closed. If you just show up and you're there, things just happen. And so they let me do this coaching for a day, clinic for a day. So when I went there, they gave all the people a bib, and it just happened, call it whatever you want to call it. But I got this bib that let me go anywhere. So everyone else could only go in certain areas. So I'm like, and she even said, you got the golden bib, you can go anywhere. Well, I'm going to the wax room. That's the first place I'm going. So I went to the wax room. I was watching them preparing Alex Harvey's skis. And they're doing this method I'd never seen before. Like I'd only known the iron, and they had this wool buffer. They're just buffing the skis. And then they hand them out, and they had this lag period where, once again, I was with the wax techs with no one around, just to be able to chat with them. And they told me about this new wax system called Yes Ski Wax. It was from Europe, and they're using it now. And it's just a buffering system. It's really easy. So I became obsessed with this system. So I emailed the company and said, listen, I want to buy some your wax. They said, well, we don't ship to Canada. We have no one that does that. We don't have a distributor. So I'm like, this light goes off. I'm like, well, maybe I should do that. This, crazy thing. So I talked to Steve and say, is this crazy? And he said, yeah, it's crazy, but you should do it. So I wrote this email to them. So I applied, and a couple other people, and they actually chose us to be their distributors. So I knew nothing about business, nothing about anything, but I was motivated, right? And motivation is always the key for anything.
Yep.
And so I learned how to build a website. I learned all this different stuff and got this thing going. And to the point where it was pretty successful in Canada. We had, a lot of clubs were jumping on board. And then we kind of saw the writing on the wall, though. There was this non-fluoro ban coming out in a couple of years, and Yes Wax was all high fluoro. And there were a couple of things that we'd asked them, you guys should do this, do this. And they said, no, we don't want to do that. And they were good to work with, but we thought, man, wouldn't it be fun if we just did our own? Because we could develop this stuff. And so with my business partner, Claude, who had been developed this non-fluoro wax, he'd been working on that for 20 years. And I now, with the system, we kind of connected. And I took it on to build a new system, an advanced kind of wool system. And then, so in 2019, we launched Ula Glide Wax. And from then, it's been a journey. And a lot of people, I said before, they don't share in any other sport. If you had something and you had this great performance, you go, oh man, I just had this unbelievable energy drink, and my performance, you brag about it. But with ski wax, no one says anything. It's like this hidden thing where if you have this great wax, you don't want anyone to know about it.
Right.
And so teams don't say anything. So it's really hard to market a product like that. And every once in a while, we get these kind of snapshots that we're doing the right thing. When last year, after this tour to ski, this guy, Edvin Auger from Sweden, has this unbelievable race where he comes from 14th and, beats Kleibo and comes second. And the next day, I get this email from his dad saying, we want to order your wax for our ski club in Sweden. My son was on your wax and stuff like that. So we get snapshots like that, wow, okay, we're doing the right thing here.
Amazing.
Now, let me just fill in a few things. I know you're literally minutes away from a class.
Yeah.
So just to fill in a few things. So Jeff waxes my skis. In 2016, I'm second in the Vassalop pit. And I'm telling Jeff, we got to figure this out. Like, I need to be faster. And so the next year, he's got this new wax. 5 minutes, waxes my skis in 5 minutes. And I'm up against guys that have spent hundreds of dollars. They have the Swix, like the top wax company, waxing their skis. And it's in the last 10K, there's no contest. I have the best skis of everyone.
Wow.
Now, what he was talking about, Tour de Ski. So that's like pretty much the biggest, outside of the World Championships and Olympics, that's the biggest Nordic skiing event.
Yeah.
That's almost all of it in Italy, where they're going to have the Olympics in 2026. If you watch that race, he's talking about the Swede, Edvin Auger, who goes from way behind to second, and you see him cross the line, punch his fist in the air. I've never seen someone celebrate a second that much because he made up so much time.
Wow.
That wax was used on more or less the snow that'll be at, the Olympic Games coming up in less than a month. So I will guarantee, Jeff will not say this, but I will guarantee Jeff McMillan, high school coach from Manitoba, has a company that's developed a wax that will win a medal at the 2026 Olympics.
Wow.
In Milan, Cortina, in a very short order. And that is quite a cool ending, Jeff, to your story, as you got to run to a class. But any final words from you?
Steve called it.
Just thank you guys. I love what you guys are doing. I've listened to all the podcasts. I drove my son to Lakehead University and listened to Adam Smith the whole time, and I'll catch up with Sue Bin, as I'm sure. But I just love what you guys are doing, and keep up the great work.
Thanks, Jeff. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. That was incredibly awesome.
Awesome.
Take care.
Good luck teaching. Well, Steve, you and I were here in the 1990s, and we're reading the Manitoban, and we're going to Max Bell sometimes on the weekends because there was something special in the air, and it was so fun to relive some of those moments through the eyes of an athlete that was on the track during those years.
Yeah, and like every week, there was some amazing accomplishment from the U of M team, and I didn't know Jeff McMillan at that time. But 10, 12, 15 years later, someone said, oh, I should introduce you to my brother-in-law, Jeff McMillan. And I instantly knew who that was. And we've become really good friends. And to hear some of those stories, those kind of behind-the-scenes stories that, we are looking at the results, but all the things kind of behind that was really cool.
It brought back some of my own good memories of running through the hallways at Sisler and turning 90-degree corners and jumping over stairs. But one thing that Jeff said about those hallways that I don't think I will ever forget, and that I'm going to bring to any group that I ever coach, is something I guess Evan Jones said, which was there are champions in every hallway.
Wow.
And the culture that was created at Sisler and then that was created at U of M that I didn't experience, or I experienced from afar, is something that is so unique and so special that few people get to experience that. So it was amazing to hear that story from the inside.
And I've never met Evan Jones, but this is one of those teams and cultures that a person creates because they have that energy. They've maybe seen it somewhere else and they make that happen. And I really feel like Jeff is completely channeling that idea with all the teams that he's, subsequently coached and is currently coaching.
And when we interviewed Lindsay, he had a funny story about Bruce Perney. in the 1972 Olympics. And Bruce was like that. Bruce made you feel loved. I wasn't even on the team, but if I went out and raced the Gimli 10 miler, Bruce would come up to me and say, hey, how are you? I felt loved. I'm sure that culture that he created, that Alec Gardner also contributed to, and now Claude Berube, of just feeling loved no matter who you were on that team, that the coaches wanted, they believed in you. They believed in your own journey wherever it was going to go. And that's a big part of that culture.
Yeah, I think like any coach that does that really makes every team member feel valued, like a shout out to those people, because you can design the best training program, whatever, do all those things. But I think having that team that everyone is part of, and that energy, like Jeff talks about, the energy that every person can bring to that team and how it multiplies, it just was such a good lesson.
And if you can bring that to your team as a coach, as a parent, as anyone who's working with kids, they're going to stay in the sport longer. And for me, that's such an important attribute. And what Jeff also said is they're memories that you never forget. His grade 10 medley relay race against Byron Goodwin is still fresh in his mind, right?
Exactly. And just like that was really cool. Like a very specific story where he just misses winning the medley relay, just misses setting a provincial record that stood for 33 years. And then the team that he coaches breaks that record, shatters that record, and the team wanted to do it. That was really cool. And just to finish off, for anyone watching the upcoming Winter Olympics.
Yes.
And Jeff won't talk about this. Jeff, we only touched on the ski wax company that he's created, but this is blown up in Europe. This is blown up in the top part of the sport. I mean, ski waxing, there's so many dynamics to it. But I guarantee when you're watching the Winter Olympics, whether it's cross-country, biathlon, Nordic combined, or probably all three of those events, you will see someone cross the finish line, win a medal, and they will be on the ski wax that Jeff has been part of creating. I guarantee that. They may not talk about it on the podium, but that will be happening, and that is a real cool story. That is a long-haul endurance story coming from the prairies all the way to the upcoming Winter Olympics.
That's so amazing. And one last thing that we touched on that is a bit of a cliffhanger is when Jeff won his 3 races at high school championships in grade 12, there was a junior varsity runner who won the 800, the 1500, the 3000, and he won the open 5000, which I don't think we have anymore. And he came from a small, tiny reserve in northern Manitoba called Oxford House, and his name's Clifford Greaves. So I just want to give a little shout out to Clifford, and maybe there's a story there one day. He was on the national with Peter Mansbridge, and he went to your old high school in his last year to train
in Thompson,
in Thompson to make it. And R.D. Parker, shout out to R.D. Parker. And so maybe one day we tell that story as well. But there's some fascinating history in our province and the prairies here that we hope to tell. So thanks again for listening. And
thanks for joining us on this second part of our 3-part series on the Hall of Fame era for the U of M track and field and cross country team. And stay tuned for part 3. Hey, Pedalcast fans, you can now reach out to John and Steve through email. Our email is longhaul@umfm.com. longhaul@umfm.com. So you can send us all your questions, all your compliments, and we might get to them on the Pedalcast. So thanks for listening, and reach out to let us know what you're thinking. Thanks for listening to the Long Haul Pedalcast. Be sure to subscribe and keep listening to all of these incredible stories that will help inspire you to create your own long haul journey.